climate change is happening, so either we've got to mitigate it and have an energy transition, or we're going to have huge impacts.
James Leaton has a potentially game-changing tool for investors.
There's certainly a huge interest amongst investors to get more answers.
Knowing the impact of climate change on individual companies will be essential knowledge for investors. James Leaton is Research Director at the UK-based think tank Carbon Tracker. They carry out innovative analysis, bringing carbon onto the financial agenda by guiding investors like Nordea to better understand the relation between climate change and investments.
Your new work at Carbon Tracker focuses on mapping the industry and all of the projects in the industry on a cost curve to separate so-called good projects from bad projects. How did this work come about, and how do you expect it to be used by investors?
Well, it's partly based on feedback from investors that they wanted to be able to differentiate more. And we saw the cost carbon curve as a way of bringing together the potential emissions and the high cost and high risk aspects of oil projects. So it enables them to see where companies are positioned on the cost curve. We think that's perfectly reasonable for investors to request that. You know, companies may not want to provide, you know, specific numbers, but they can certainly explain, well, this is why we've got this many projects above a certain level on the cost curve. And we've proposed $95 market price as a good sort of focus point. Above that, we think there's certainly a financial case to answer for the companies.
Many investors argue that the issue of stranded assets is not at all pertinent yet, given the time horizons of both their investments as well as current projects. And therefore they're not willing to divest and give up the potential return in the interim. What is your response to this?
I think we can see that in a short-term financial model, you're not going to pick up these long-term trends very well. You know, the market is very short-term. But what we do see is that we've already seen the decline of many coal companies. So the pure US coal mining companies have lost, you know, 3/4 of their value in the last few years. We want investors to be ahead of that curve and not be taken down with that kind of decline in value. And if they're using predictions that are based on historical performance, then they're not going to pick that up. So this is why we're raising it as a kind of preventative measure, if you like. But if you're not looking out for these issues, then you could get caught with the downward trend.
At Carbon Tracker, they believe a series of events in the near future will determine what will be done about climate change.
There's obviously a range of different ways things could go. I mean, one option is you have, you know, a couple of major extreme weather events in key political centres, and there's a huge response. We've got the current, you know, situation in China where air quality in the urban environment is driving political change. They can't avoid that issue any longer. So I think we can see, obviously, there's an ongoing political process around climate, but you could have a huge shift from a bilateral deal between US and China, or a huge shift from events driving particular countries that we can't predict.
So I will ask you, even though you can't predict it, what will happen in the next 5 to 10 years? When will we reach an inflection point?
Well, hopefully sooner rather than later. I mean, what we are seeing is that, you know, the predictions for when peak coal use in China is going to happen keep coming forward. So we've seen, you know, some of the mainstream analysts from Bernstein and so on showing, you know, in the next couple of years China's coal use peaks, and that has major structural issues for the whole coal sector and demand, and that could really shift things. So again, there's also the regulatory side, and getting a major deal from some major emitters would also help send a strong signal. Understanding the range of potential outcomes is what's important.
Thank you, James, so much for being with us today.